So threats, threats, threats. Threats are everywhere. But what do we do about threats?
Should we feel threatened or should we feel resilient? What do you guys feel? Should we feel threatened or should we feel resilient? Both? Both? Oh wow, interesting.
Interesting, interesting.
But yeah, after this thing, after our talk, like you won't be feeling threatened much, but yeah, you will be empowered and feeling resilient.
So we are going to give a presentation today on how to build resilient web applications using effective threat modeling. The presentation is designed in such a way that we would be first sharing how application resilience works, what it is really about, and then what mistake does organizations are prone to while performing threat modeling that makes threat modeling ineffective, and what we can do to fix it.
Yeah, the very first part will be how you could make your applications resilient. And the second component is like what are the effective strategies to build those applications resilient with effective threat modeling. So let's quickly begin. But before we start, we just wanted to share our brief introductions. My name is Nikunj Doshi, and I have been working in the tech industry for the past 7 to 8 years. I have spent most of my time working in different tech roles like software engineering, DevSecOps engineering, and I was also a solutions consultant. So I did my master's degree from Northeast University, and that's where like I got my knowledge and emphasis on cybersecurity. Apart from that, I also have an MBA degree where I focus more on the consulting and management side of the industry. But moreover, most likely I work on open source technologies and I do DevSecOps engineering and consulting. So that's like a very high level overview about me.
Thank you for the wonderful introduction, Nikunj. My name is Kathan, and I work as a cybersecurity risk analyst at University of Illinois. I gain expertise in performing security risk and threat assessments, performing compliance audits for an organization. And what interests me about cybersecurity and being in cybersecurity is staying ahead of the evolving threat landscape and cyber landscape that is changing rapidly. And so we need to make sure that we don't make security just reactive, but also it aligns with business goals. So that's about me, and we'll start the presentation.
So before we begin, I just wanted to know how many of you are like working in big tech companies or enterprise companies here? Oh wow, that's a pretty great number here. Great raise of hands. Anyone working with the startups or like mid-sized companies? Oh, nice. So Gartner report, which was surveyed recently, it says that 70% of the organizations will have implemented application resilience by now. So what does that it implies? And what is like the part of the strategy? It is to implement disaster recovery and business continuity BCP plans. For what? To face with the cyber attacks or just to have rollover system failures and take the preventive measures for that. Wow, the problem with these industries, like most of the big companies or the 10 companies are able to afford that. But what happens if you are a small organizations and don't have a very huge cost to support these tools or to purchase or procure those tools? Then there are various ways like we want to emphasize here, like how an engineer or like a team or an organization could make their applications resilient. So before we deep dive into that, like I just wanted to give you a high level overview what application resilience is. It refers to an application's ability to quickly adapt and recover from any kind of issues. Nowadays, in the advent of AI, we all see what are the different kind of issues which we face on day-to-day basis, and especially what are those primarily issues which we face. Number one is like hardware malfunctions if you are working in the hardware industry, or it could be any kind of software critical errors or cyber attacks which we face or encounter on daily basis. And one thing which we'd like to avoid is like the minimum downtime. And why you should be building those applications resilient? To prevent downtime, obviously, and to ensure business continuity plans. Protect users' trust and data integrity. So why you have to do that? If you fail to do that, most of the customers with whom you are working, if the data is leaked or breached, then it could be a major repercussions for the organizations. So that's why. Have you ever come across this tool from Netflix called Chaos Monkey? Has anyone ever heard of it? Oh wow. We know how powerful those tool is. It's like very great tool for using resilience testing. It also supports various kind of other testing mechanisms. And that's the reason like we want to ensure that like your application stays resilient. But how do you make your applications resilient? What are the things which you need to ensure so that your applications remain resilient? The very first thing any engineer or any cybersecurity expert needs to do is to identify vulnerabilities and threats. Most of you in your day-to-day activity, you will be obviously doing that. So what you need to do, like assess your applications on daily basis, how they can handle attacks. Most common attacks would be DDoS, DOS, or data breaches. Second thing is to mitigate the impact of your attack. How you can do that? By limiting the damage through redundancies or failure, have a backup and recovery systems in line. Third thing is to prioritize risk and counter measurements. So I recollect an incident while I was working as a site reliability engineer. We also had to focus on the risk analysis. So like let's assume like there is a critical issue in your system. How do you do that? You prioritize those risks, right? P1, P2, P3, P5, all the way till P10. With P1 would be the biggest risk parameter. So if you ever encounter like a P1 risk, that is like a very severe level escalation. So without further ado, you have to work on that issue. So as a SRE, like we were used to work on those kind of critical issues. And now in the age of AI, we have to adapt to evolving threats. With the advent of AI, there are like so many new things. Even the threats are becoming intelligent. And like nowadays we are facing so many different kind of challenges in the ecosystem of cybersecurity. So there was one report from McKinsey on cybersecurity ROI. Companies, those who are investing in cybersecurity initiatives, and that also includes threat modeling, which Kathan will be discussing and deep diving on it, they experience an ROI of 3 to 5 times for every dollar spent. So what does this implies? Any company who have been like using effective cybersecurity mechanisms, be it for application resiliency or anything, which could help you gain a lot of return on investments. So that's why now many companies are focusing on these niche initiatives. And we also see this particular graph that, like as per the report for InfoSec Institute, what will be the biggest advantage or like for effective threat modeling and application resilience? So by this report it says by doing this application resilience test and with effective threat modeling, companies were able to reduce their vulnerabilities by 65%, which is a very huge significant number. They were also able to improve their incident response by 70% and speed up remediation times by 60%. And the last thing which was focused is also the cost. Many times when companies are focusing on just reducing the risk or prioritize those risks, but also it comes with a great cost. Do you agree? Right? So how you can do that? Like by using these techniques, you can also lower your cost of fixing those issues. So this was like a very high level view about like how to make your application resilient. But what is like a way how you could navigate to make your applications resilient? So one such way is threat modeling. So Kathan will be deep diving into how to make your applications resilient with effective threat modeling strategies.
Thank you for the wonderful introduction on application resilience, Nikunj. I'll take over from here. So let's see how can effective threat modeling really help us build resilient applications. According to an OWASP survey report, in 2024, it was found out that 45% of organizations doesn't perform threat modeling consistently, and only 1 in 5 companies review their threat models regularly. And this is a huge number. And basically, this gives us a point to identify why is it so and why threat modeling is not having that priority, given that priority within an organization when an application is being built. And so we'll explore why effective threat modeling is necessary and how we can make it more effective. So before we go into it, let us just first understand what does threat modeling means at its core. It consists of 4 steps. Threat modeling means identifying potential threats within the organization, assessing associated risk with the threats, trying to mitigate the risk by implementing security controls within the organization, and try to validate if the implemented security controls work properly. And in this way, basically, we can perform threat modeling exercise on any application within the organization. So threat modeling refers to identify, assess, mitigate, and validate. Now, why does really threat modeling matters? Catching a security flaw in an early stage of an application really helps an organization reduce the cost by fixing it at an early stage. And so they don't accumulate technical debt. And when, suppose, say, if an application is at a prominent stage and they identify a critical vulnerability, it would be costing them a lot. if they have fixed it as compared to if they have fixed it at an early stage. So fixing issues early in the SDLC can reduce the cost up to 100 times compared to post-production fixes. Second thing, security is basically a shared responsibility. And so it's often siloed. Threat modeling basically brings devs, architects, and security together, and it helps create a common language of risk across the organization and across the teams who will be working on threat modeling. So it helps us organize and identify a common language of risk that everyone understands across the organization who are involved in threat modeling. Third, suppose say if you are in a healthcare or a fintech industry, you would have come across compliance frameworks such as PCI DSS, HIPAA, which you need to feel compliant. Threat modeling basically perfectly aligns with the requirements. What threat modeling does is, it shows the auditors that you are not just reactive, but you are improving your threat modeling and you are serious about it on a day-to-day basis and you are evolving with the evolving threats. At the end of the day, it's not about just resolving the audits, it's about resilience. So threat modeling really helps us build a software that is resilient to attacks, and how we can make it more resilient, and how the software can function on any sunny day. So these are a few of the reasons which says why threat modeling is really important and why it matters. Now, let's just identify the process in a nutshell. So before we jump into the threats, let's ask a question. Why are we all here today? We have an objective in mind. So basically, once we start with the threat modeling, if we have a clear objective in our mind, it would help us identify the business and security goals. Are we protecting sensitive data? Are we doing it for compliance? Are we doing it for availability? This gives us direction. Now, when we have the direction, the second step is to visualize what we are looking into. So this thing helps, in this step, basically what we do is, we map out the system architecture, we create data flow diagrams that helps us see data entry points, data interaction within the organization, and what are the entry and exit points. You cannot secure what you cannot see. So second step deals with visualizing what we are building. Now, here comes the interesting part. That is the third step, identifying threats. Now, as we have visualized what the architecture looks like, what our duty is, we can identify threats by using standard threat modeling frameworks such as Stride, MITRE ATT&CK, which helps us mimic attackers' behavior and identify what can go wrong with the application. Fourth step deals with mitigation. So once we have identified the threats, we need to make sure what we are going to do with it. So what we do is, we assess the threats, we rank them, and we try to implement security controls in the organization so that we would be able to mitigate threats, and we are able to ensure that what we have came across just doesn't stay in the spreadsheet. Fifth step is to validate. We need to make sure that did we do good. We need to make sure that the mitigations that we kept in place, or the security controls that we kept in place to mitigate the threats, are working effectively once the software has been deployed for production. So basically, this is a threat modeling process in a nutshell, and these are the 5 steps organizations usually pursue while they do threat modeling. Now, we all know that there are different threat modeling frameworks, such as Stride, Linden, Pasta. Stride is the most known framework by Microsoft. Linden is a privacy-based threat framework. Pasta is another framework that helps us mimic attack simulation and threat analysis of the attackers. Now, we all know about these different frameworks, and when it comes to threat modeling, it's not like one size fits all. It depends on what the organization's goals are, what are their objectives, what is the organization's size, and what type of threat modeling are they looking into. So it's not about selecting a particular framework. The key is about selecting a framework and then using it consistently across your organization and across the life cycle. Now, we all know, now as we have seen what is threat modeling is and what are some common frameworks, professionals in the industry know the application of threat modeling and the prominent frameworks that we can use for threat modeling. But still, we see news on every day that application got breached, application got down, or it has been attacked, or there has been a data breach. So it means there's something that's going wrong. So what makes threat modeling ineffective at times, and how we can fix it? And let's identify some common pitfalls that an organization are prone to make on their day-to-day basis while they're performing threat modeling. So the first mistake is treating threat modeling as a one-time activity. How many of you think that threat modeling is a one-time activity? Any answers? No, right? Definitely, yeah. Threat modeling is not a one-time activity. We design the system, we do the threat modeling, and we just never look back. And so system change, features evolve, attack vectors change, and threat becomes obsolete, or the model becomes obsolete. So what we need to do is, we need to consider threat modeling as not a project, but as a process that keeps on improving as we move forward in our application lifecycle. Would you lock your house once and never check back again? No, that's not going to happen, right? So you need to integrate threat modeling in such a way that it is revisited again and again, and you stay abreast of the evolving threats. Second mistake that the organization do is they just focus on known threats. We all know that there are some compliance requirements that are needed for an organization to fulfill. And what they do is they just follow predefined checklist or predefined threat libraries. But if you just perform threat modeling based on predefined compliance and libraries, then you are preparing for yesterday's war, because threats evolve on a day-to-day basis. And attackers find creative ways to exploit their application. They are not going to go by your documentation. So what you need to do is you need to use frameworks like MITRE ATT&CK and STRIDE in an appropriate and in advanced way, so that you would be able to mimic the attacker's behavior and stay abreast of what's going on. Imagine one thing. You're playing chess. Your opponent is playing by books, and you are improvising. Who will win? Of course, the one who is improvising. So you just don't need to go by the books, but you need to think creatively. Third mistake is what threat modeling is considered about. Third mistake is threat modeling is considered about a security thing. Threat modeling often becomes a security silo. But security alone cannot know the internals of the application or the system design. For that, we need to involve various teams while we are performing threat modeling, such as developers to know the implementation of the software, system architects to know how the system architecture is designed, and business professionals or business stakeholders from different departments. It's not about doing more meetings, it's about a better collaboration. So we need to make sure that we involve appropriate teams while we are doing threat modeling. Fourth thing, what organizations do is they get this number of threats and now they are confused what to do with it. Not all threats are equal. Remember, if an organization identifies 10 threats and they say that everything is critical, so if everything is critical, nothing is critical. And so it doesn't work in that way. So teams often freeze in analysis paralysis, and they sometimes focus on addressing low-risk threats, and high-risk threats would be sitting in their production environment. But at that time, they have exhausted their resources. So what we need to do is we need to look through a risk-based lens. So we can use FAIR model or a DREAD model, which gives us a risk-based analysis of what to address first based on the impact and likelihood of the threat affecting the organization. Fifth mistake that organizations usually do is not following through the identified threats. You did threat modeling, you found the risk, but now the risk is registered in a spreadsheet, and it just dies in spreadsheet. That won't make any sense. This is a security theater, a checklist with no action. So real security means tracking the threats with tickets, assigning owners, assigning responsibilities, assigning deadlines, and try to make sure that threats are being resolved, the threats identified are being resolved. If you have identified a threat and it's still unmitigated threat is equal to unmitigated risk, and so it will result in loss of an application resiliency. So now, as we have seen some mistakes, let's see some best practices that we can do for effective threat modeling. So as said, continuous collaboration. Try to integrate threat modeling into a software development lifecycle at each and every stage, so you stay ahead of the threat landscape. Second, think like an attacker. Attacker doesn't play by the book. They find creative ways to attack your application, and so you need to make sure that you are also thinking in a creative way. Third thing, collaborate across teams. Try to include various stakeholders across the organization in threat modeling exercise so that you ensure that you are capturing the threat model in an appropriate way. Fourth, use visualization tools, which would be performing data flow diagrams or architectural diagrams. You can use tools like Microsoft Threat Modeling tool that helps you make the diagram of your organization. And so once you have the visual of how the application looks like, you can basically see what threats are coming into your organization. Fifth, prioritize smartly. Remember, if everything is urgent, nothing is urgent. So you need to prioritize prioritize the threats based on the risk of the threat and its impact and likelihood of affecting the organization. Fifth, automate wherever possible. Leverage threat modeling tools such as OWASP Threat Dragon, which is a free tool, or Microsoft Threat Modeling tool, where you can automate the threat modeling to a certain extent within your organization. So by following these ways, you can ensure that you are performing effective threat modeling and you are just not doing something that's already gone.
Yeah, so any final thoughts from your end before we give? So we just want to conclude by saying that anyone can build an effective, resilient application, but what is actually required from an engineer's perspective or a developer's perspective is like a shift in mindset. So company needs to create a culture for that, And what we want to imply here is threat modeling isn't a checklist or a checkbox. It's an ongoing strategy. Every day, like, you have to keep on continuously focusing on that, thinking about those strategies. And how you can do that is by addressing these common pitfalls in your organizations and drastically improve the organization's security posture. And the last thing is, we want to build applications which are not just only functional but also resilient. And that is what we created in this particular presentation about how to do the things effectively. There are things which you can do ordinarily, but let's not make it effectively. So thank you so much for your presentation and giving us your attention, time spent. I know, like, we all are ready and hungry for lunch, but thank you so much. We really appreciate, and any feedback here.
Thank you. Any questions?
So I have a question.
Sure.
When you're talking about these threat modeling frameworks, right? These were actually created for regular SDLC cycles, right?
Correct.
Now with Cursor AI, vibe coding, and all of these other, like, let's say, entrants, how are we accurately modeling some of these threats? Because unless you have a kind of understanding of the entire, architectural workflow, from what was the training data to how was the, training model to how it's actually being implemented and its attack surfaces, how are we kind of taking some of these elements into consideration and
Correct.
saying that our threat modeling frameworks, which I assume were created when you had your regular SDLC cycle, how are they accurately translating to now, let's say, a Cursor AI that's actually building this entire thing for you from start to finish?
Correct. So if you talk about Cursor AI, and if you talk about AI, it would be integrating somewhere within an environment, right? So as I said earlier, threat modeling is not about selecting a particular framework. It's selecting one framework and then using it effectively. Even though they were created earlier, the threat remains same. So if we talk about Stride, it deals with spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, and stuff like that, right? So basically, still, our ultimate goal would be to protect the three pillars of cybersecurity. That would be confidentiality, integrity, and availability. When you integrate these AI models into your application, you can use the similar model, I would say, but then you need to think in a more creative way that how you can apply this model to the emerging threats that are coming with the emerging AI, right? So one of the threats that is coming with this AI is biased information, right? There can be an information bias. An attacker can attack your system and try to bias the information that has been stored in your LLM model. So what does that deal with? It deals with violating integrity. So spoofing has this thing called tampering, right? There is one in Stride there is one thing called tampering. So basically, your integrity is being violated by the attacker, and so you can still apply the same threat model to that particular scenario when you integrate it with your environment. But then you need to see, like, what is the function that the functionality provides while you integrate it within an environment, and then how we can use the current threat model in a more advanced way in order to mimic the threats that an attacker can attack your application.
Right, but that's from a standpoint of you have built the application now, you
Correct.
have an attack surface wherein your data could be tampered, and hence you're kind of using the Strike framework.
Correct.
However, if you kind of take a step back and say, my entire application is actually built on training data, right? Training data is kind of the bedrock on what I'm building everything on. So how are you going to apply the same framework to the actual training data? Because your training data is going to be the critical input that actually goes into it. Once it's into the system, that's fine, you have a framework to address it. But can you take the same kind of framework applied to the training data itself, or your whatever data set that you're going to apply, and say, hey, these are the threats that are actually going to emerge from your training data, let alone what the attack surfaces your application will eventually go.
And that's what threat modeling is about, right? Threat modeling is about identifying potential threats that you might be having from your current data. So basically, you can apply the models to your training data, and that would really help you identify what threats your organization can face based on the training data, and based on that inputs and based on the identification of the threats, you can basically use it. You can basically find mitigations around it, and then you can implement the mitigations in an organization before it goes in production, or like if it goes live. And in that way, maybe you can use it. But that's a great question, and maybe we can do more research into it.
Thank you.
So I think there's no debate about why we should not be doing threat modeling.
Correct.
We must do it. However, the business or developer, the pushback comes that hey, we need to push our product in the market as quick as possible because our competitors are going faster. And threat modeling is more like a time-consuming process.
Right.
You need to collaboration between the development team, engineering team, whoever not. And then you have to, like, it's kind of big, you will continuously need the diaper change,
Inputs,
right?
yeah.
So what are your thoughts on those ones? How to keep pace of?
I think that comes from the leadership, like what an organization leadership wants. Of course, we know that we are evolving. We are in a technological world that's evolving too fast, and everyone wants to ship their product out and try to be first in the market, right? But that shouldn't be compromising the integrity of customers' data, or that shouldn't be leading to compromising confidentiality of customer data. So I think so. Leadership can play an important role by communicating, by establishing communication within the team, between different teams, and trying to show that these are the values that our organization brings to our customers, and we want to stand by these values. We also need to make sure that how we can optimize the process, but in order to ship the application fast, we also want to ensure that we are not compromising customer data. So I think leadership can play a big role in that.
And if you come across our slides, like in the second mistake which we were talking about, like not just focus on one aspect, but like distribute across various aspects to its priorities. So this is like cumulatively we can ship the product faster, but like doing threat modeling on individual aspects of your applications or the systems together, and that's how like it will be able to help you deliver the products faster and to the markets, to the consumers.
Does that answer your question, or would you have some inputs on that?
No, I think this is a very practical thing. I'm not going to name the tools, but there are tools. Those are fit in your agile methodology.
Yes.
And you are absolutely right. Means you cannot boil the ocean with threat modeling. Pick one thread, do one piece of threat modeling, evolve it, mature it, massage it, and keep adding. So you can scale it up.
Okay.
So two ways it will go. One is basically you are doing threat modeling, but you have very less coverage, but you can improve the coverage over time.
Over time.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
We had like a tons of different tools where like we wanted to like tell our like more, but just to keep our presentation with like the minimalistic time frame. So that's why like we focused more on the theory agenda as well as the practical fit for it.
But we hope it helps. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much everyone. Really appreciate it.